But here, as we come to our service and we're looking in the Word, thinking about it being Mother's Day and having a Mother's Day message. And it can be a difficult thing to put together. And I was thinking about motherhood and sort of some of the mystique, the truths, the myths of motherhood. I was reminded of a comedy performance by a gentleman named Thor Ramsey. And he's talking about greeting cards and Mother's Day cards, and he says the problem is all of these Mother's Day cards always say to the most wonderful mother, with very flowy words, in the world. And he says, why don't they just make a card that says you did the best you could? And of course, you get for your birthday, you're a disappointment too on your birthday card. But it's true that we think, and sometimes there is a mythology and a mystique of this perfection of motherhood. In fact, there are some that come to this day with fear, trembling, and it seems to show them again how inadequate they are. Or sometimes we think about mothers and our experiences, and we may have had mothers that were very imperfect and difficult to honor. And so I'd like to just kind of look at that, to look at some of those ideas, some truths, some myths about motherhood today, and hopefully give us some ways to move forward. The first myth of motherhood that I'd like to deal with, sometimes we think if we could be a better mother if only we had perfect children. It's all the children's fault. The children are driving me insane. Now, don't get me wrong, this can be an issue because, children can be very vexing. But we're going to look at a mother today who had a perfect child. Now, some of you may have thought that the first child, if you're a second or a third child, maybe the first child was the perfect child that your mother had and then you weren't. But we're going to look at a mother who had a perfect child. We're going to look a little bit at the life of Mary. Mary, who had a perfect child, who was called in the book of Luke, the mother of my Lord. Blessed are you among women, in Luke chapter 1. Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you. So if we look at, I can't be if any mother had a chance to be a perfect mother because of having a perfect child, it would be Mary. And yet we find in Mary a very imperfect mother. Certainly imperfect as we would see mothering and motherhood today. Indeed, if Mary was alive today, she probably would have been in one of these groups where mothers are shamed because they're not perfect or they don't do things the way the rest of the mothers group does. What do I mean by saying that Mary was highly imperfect as a mother? Well, the first thing that we see of Mary is in the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 41, one of her first imperfections as a mother. In Luke chapter 2, beginning in verse 41 through 52, but we're going to read verse 41 through 43. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. When he became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning after spending the full number of days, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware of it. You can't take and do much worse as a mother in many cases than to lose your child. Not only losing the child like in the grocery store, they left the city and then they had to come back to find him. We see that Mary had some issues here. As they look back and they didn't find him, they returned to Jerusalem looking for him. They thought he was elsewhere. And they didn't understand him. What's going on with this? Another thing where we see that Mary was a very imperfect mother. The book of John, chapter 3 and 4. This is another one that sometimes happens. Book of John, chapter 2, verse 3. The first miracle recorded in the book of John. She comes and it says, the wine ran out, and the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Jesus said to her, woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come. She wanted to get Jesus to perform. She knew at some point he probably could handle this problem, and she wanted to get him to perform. She wanted to learn through, to live and to have what she wanted through her child. And we've looked at before in Mark chapter 3, as we've been going through Mark. In verse 21, his own people, which would have included his mother, heard about this, what his ministry that he was doing. They went out to take custody of him for they were saying he has lost his senses. She had a fear that her baby boy was in over his head, that he was truly had lost his mind. So all of the things that we can think of as mothers, that sometimes the inattentiveness of losing the child, of not being attentive at all times, wanting to manipulate the situation to become, to let your child live for you. The fear of letting your child out there, and that they might be in over their head of trying to rescue them from themselves. And being that helicopter parent, that one that's rescuing the children out of something. All of these things that we commonly associate with mothers, Mary had them all. And we see that she has these points of lapse in faith and in judgment. But it's interesting to see how she responds to these issues. Because it's not only true that Mary was a very imperfect mother, but what we do see is Mary's response in faith of God as she is working through this time. From the very beginning, what does Mary say when she's told of the virgin birth, that everything's going to happen? What's her first thing that we hear her say? Behold, the bondslave of the Lord, may it be done according to your word in Luke chapter 1. Even when she's having issues, and she's having some back and forth at the wedding, what does she say when Christ says, my hour is not yet come? She says to the servant, whatever he says to you, do it. Having faith that whatever he did as Christ and as Lord would be appropriate. We even see that she had faith and understanding to be there through the end. In John chapter 19, but standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. She was there through the end, even through, though she wasn't perfect. She had faith. We see that she continued to have faith even in the resurrection, as she is noted as being with the disciples in the book of Acts. That she had faith in God and in his power throughout all of it. And that she was there, again, along with the disciples, waiting for Pentecost. In Acts 1, verse 14, it says, Mary, the mother of Jesus. And we can probably understand that she continued in faith, as we know that James, brother of Jesus, or half-brother of Jesus, ended up continuing in faith and taking an understanding more and more. So as we look at this idea of motherhood and the fact that we have the thought of being imperfect as a mother, it is comforting to know that that is normal, to be imperfect as a mother. It will happen. And the model that we have is to continue to take, with every failure, with every difficulty, to take it to the Lord and have him work it out. It's not an easy thing. It's not always a joyful thing. As we see the very prophecy for Mary, what was her good news about being a mother? In Luke 2, Simeon says in chapter 2, verse 34 and 35, Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and for a sign to be opposed, and a sword will pierce even your own soul, to the end that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed. It's difficult. It requires pain. It has failure. But as we respond in faith, that's the response for mothers, even before and through all of this difficulty. Now, we've talked a lot about mothers and their struggles, but I don't want to leave it there and have a sermon where we just talk and tell mothers what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. The other thing that sometimes we come to Mother's Day and we might have difficulty is there are many who have imperfect mothers. And that can be difficult to follow the biblical imperative to honor our mothers and fathers. That's one of the commandments repeated in both New and Old Testament. And what's interesting is that it doesn't say honor your mothers and your fathers if they're perfect. I did not read that there when I was taking and reading that. It says honor your mother and your father. And that can be difficult. How do you do that? Is that even possible after pain and misunderstandings? Well, we know that it is because we've just described a very imperfect mother in Mary. And yet the interesting thing about that is that was the mother chosen by God to be his mother here on this earth. We don't have to have had a perfect mother. Christ certainly did not. So if you ever wonder, does he know what it's like to live with a mother that's not perfect? Yes, he does. And what does he do? Well, we'll go back to John chapter 19. Jesus said to his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." And he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own household. Even with all her failures, even with everything that was going on in his life at that point in time, one thing we see that he remembered to honor his mother, to provide for her. This was important. As the oldest son in that culture, he was to provide and support his mother. And she would now outlive him, and yet he becomes he passes that on. He honors her as his mother. From the cross, I've wondered sometimes maybe that isn't why John lasted the longest of all the disciples, because the Lord had committed Mary to his care. And that's just speculation, but we can certainly see that he honored his mother even though she was imperfect. And indeed at times was against the things that he was trying to do, trying to stop him, not understanding his ministry, his work. He consistently honors her throughout his life and his death. Somebody's probably thinking right about now, well, yeah, he was God. He was perfect. Of course, Christ could honor an imperfect mother. I mean, he's God. He can do anything. But isn't that the point? When we have imperfect family, imperfect relationships, we're following Christ by honoring them, by moving forward with them. And you know what? Within us and within our abilities, sometimes it's not possible to honor our parents. They get under our skins. They know all our buttons. Sometimes they've failed. Sometimes they've failed us tremendously. We say, yeah, of course, Jesus could take and honor his mother, honor his imperfect mother. But I can't. And that's the point. Of course you can't. He could do it because he was God. We can do it through the power of Christ in us. It's something that others don't have that ability to honor and to cherish in those ways. We've been given a chance to do that through Christ. And for some, this can be a way of showing him to our mothers. Maybe we had a mother who was not saved. By honoring them, we can take and show Christ to them. Maybe there's pain. And in many cases, there are painful memories of things that went on. When these difficult times come, to honor it's a thing for us to take to the Lord. Not to hold on. And not to fake it and say, well, for one day of the year, I'll take and call and talk, and everyone will play nice, and we'll assume like we're one big, happy family. Anybody can do that. We have a whole day devoted to it. But to truly have reconciliation and honoring, it takes the power of Christ to do that. And so that's my charge to mothers and to children. Mothers, yes, you will be imperfect. And it's okay to not pretend that you are perfect. But when those difficulties and those hard times come, do we take it to the Lord in faith? Because he's the one that can actually do this. Because no one else can. And no one else can help us. As children, do we honor our mothers and our fathers? But we're going to take and focus on mothers today. It works for both. Are we willing to honor them as Christ would have us to do? Now again, that can be difficult. There are many families where pain and sorrow, anger exists. You say, I can't do that. Yeah, we know you can't. But God can. This is a time to place that in God's hands, to work through it. Because the myths are you have to be a perfect mother, or you can only be a perfect mother if you have a perfect child. No, that won't be the case. The truth is, that mothering is difficult and you need Christ and to go to Him with the failures that you will make as a mother. As a child, the myth is that nothing good can come unless you have a perfect family or a perfect home life. And that's doomed to just control you for the rest of your life. The truth is that through Christ, that cycle can be broken. Pain can be healed. And the honoring of parents can be our form of witness. Again, difficult truths in some ways, difficult in practice, but truths nonetheless as we look forward this day to what the truth is. I'm going to take and just close in prayer, and we'll have our final song. Lord, you have given us, Lord, our parents. Lord, you've given us our children. Lord, as we celebrate today, Lord, as some may be in difficulty and pain with memories, whether of failures on our part or failures of others. Lord, I pray that you would bring it, that we would bring it all to you, to bring it to the cross, Lord. And Lord, not to bear that anymore ourselves. Lord, I just pray these things in your name. Amen.